This is the Voices of Titanic podcast, episode 6, and I am your host, Sam. Thank you so much for joining me today. Last week, I learned that out of the 891 crew members, only 23 were women. That's less than 3%. And out of the 23 women, 20 survived while 3 perished. I was honestly really surprised to learn that any of the female crew members had died, and I wanted to learn more about their stories. I'll try to cover as many crew members as I can over the series, but first I would like to start with one of the 3 female stewardesses that did not survive the night. One of these women was Catherine Jane Wallis, known to those close to her as Sissy. Her story it's brutal. Catherine did not have an easy life by any means. Again, no story is worse than another. They are all tragic, but some of the things you learn are very difficult to comprehend and are very upsetting. But before we get into all that, let's go back to the beginning. Catherine Jane Wallis was born Catherine Jane Moore in 1876, possibly in March. Her parents were Robert and Anne Moore. She lists her hometown as Hants. Hants is an abbreviation for Hampshire County in England. William Frederick Cheverton from last week's episode listed his hometown as Hants as well. The 1881 census lists her birthplace as Southampton and also shows she and her family were living in Southampton when she was 5 years old. Hampshire is located in south-central England. The county comprises 11 districts, including East Hampshire, Hart, New Forest, Test Valley, Basingstoke, Dean, Eastleigh, Fareham, Gosport, Havant, Rushmore, and Winchester, and it also covers the city of Portsmouth and Southampton. Southampton is a port city. I'm sure we all know this is the big dock where Titanic came from, that epic day on April 10th. Southampton has a rich history dating back to the Roman town of Clausentum, not sure if I'm saying that correctly, and the Anglo-Saxon settlement of Hampton. It played an important part during medieval times as a port, and in the 19th century, the city was revived after a railway link to London was created in the 1800s. It's currently one of the country's major ports and a popular spot for embarking cruise ships. Back to Catherine. Catherine lived at 15 Ransoms Terrace in Southampton with her parents and 2 older brothers, Robert and Cornelius. She and her brothers are listed as scholars, while their father is documented as a stevedore. This is my first time being introduced to this term. I had no idea what it was, but a stevedore is someone who loads or unloads cargo from a ship in port. 10 years later, at the age of 15, she is still living at 15 Ransoms Terrace. Her brother Robert has left the home, and it is now her and her brother Cornelius living with their parents. At the end of 1898, she married James Richard Wallis in Greenwich, a borough in London. Richard was the same age as Catherine and also from Southampton. In the census records, he is listed as a beer brewer, and in 1901, the family was living at 64 Paynes Road in Fremantle, Southampton, now with a 1-year-old daughter named Melita, born in 1900. In 1903, the Wallises traveled on the SS Philadelphia from Southampton to New York. They left on October 3rd and arrived on October 10th, having $150 in their possession, and they were visiting a friend, H.J. Miller, in Ellsworth, Pennsylvania. Like many of these stories, there is a time gap here, but it appears the family stayed in the States for an extended period of time. They were on another passenger list for the SS Haverford in March of 1907, traveling from Philadelphia to Liverpool, and in addition to Melita, there was now a son, James, in tow. Tragically, in 1911, Catherine was listed as a widow and was living with her father, who was also a widower and now 74 years old. Her husband died in early 1911. He was only 34. In a very twisted act of fate, one newspaper says that her husband died in a drowning incident, but I could find no further details. He was buried at the Southampton Old Cemetery. There are now 2 additional children, bringing the total to 4. So we have Frederick, who was 3 years old, and Cecilia, who was 1 year old. Catherine has no occupation listed at this time in 1911, and her father is documented as a pensioner. Their address was 111 Church Street, Shirley, Southampton. Now, this is very interesting. What's confusing to me is why Melita is not on this census. Melita would have only been 11 at the time, but she's found listed as a niece in Albert Norton's household on 77 Chantry Road. The Nortons will come up again in the story in a couple of minutes, but Albert was a hairdresser and a tobacconist. Melita lived with him, his wife, their 15-year-old daughter, and their adopted 1-year-old daughter. The census says that the family had 2 children, but only one was living. So I'm wondering if they took Melita in to alleviate some of the stress off of Catherine. If anyone knows the reason for this or has any ideas, please let me know on Instagram. Catherine and her children later take another heartbreaking hit. After losing her husband and her children losing their father, Catherine's dad, Robert, passed away in December of 1911. Catherine is now alone with 4 children and no parents to help her. Being a single mother in this day and age is already difficult enough, but imagine experiencing this in 1911 and 1912. On top of that, you are dealing with 2 huge losses in the span of a year. I also can't imagine what her children were going through after losing their father and grandfather. It's absolutely brutal, and it's so much grief in a short amount of time. Between the 1911 census and signing onto the Titanic, Catherine worked on the RMS Oceanic. My best guess would be that after losing her father, she needed to look for work to help support her family, so I imagine it was pretty shortly after his passing. On April 6, 1912, Catherine Jane Wallis signed onto the Titanic as a matron in 3rd class with a monthly wage of £3. Her address was listed as 23 St. Mary's Place in Southampton. Like the other crew we have discussed, she was to board on April 10, 1912 at 6 a.m. Now, if you're like me, maybe you're wondering what a matron on a ship is. I had actually never heard of this position before, but a matron had special responsibilities. She would have looked after the women, the children, and the families of 3rd class, and she would have looked out for signs of illness, brought food to the cabins of those who may have been unable to attend meals in the dining room. She would have helped passengers navigate the sanitary facilities, and she would have been a support and kind of like a beacon of protection for single women traveling alone in case of any untoward behavior occurring from the male passengers or crew. This was a very motherly role, and as a mother of 4, I'm sure it was something she was quite good at. We have no documentation or witness testimony about Catherine's experience on Titanic or her final night on the ship, but some have theorized that she sacrificed her life and took care of her charges, while others, and I've seen this mentioned in a few newspapers, say she was seen giving up her seat in a lifeboat to return to her cabin to retrieve her personal papers. In an April 30th article in 1912 by the Daily Sketch, it states that, quote, "The stewardess matron, Mrs. Wallis, refused to leave her room. Her remark was, 'I am not going on deck. I am going back where I am safe,' end quote." I don't know what to make of this. Personally, it doesn't cite any sources for this quote, and I find it kind of hard to believe this is what happened. It's obviously within the realm of possibility that she could have wanted to stay in her room. A lot of people, as we've talked about, initially did not want to leave the ship, but she wasn't just a stewardess, she was a matron, and I have a hard time believing that she would have abandoned her post, abandoned her passengers. I don't really see it happening, but it is possible. Some have speculated she stayed with her fellow stewardesses, while a discussion on Reddit that I thought was really interesting pondered whether she might have been one of the stewardesses turned away by Officer Lightoller. During the American testimony, Senator Smith asked Mr. Lightoller how passengers were selected going into the lifeboats. Lightoller responded, "By their sex." He was asked, "Whenever you saw a woman?" Lightoller said, "Precisely." Senator Smith inquires, "She was invited to go into one of these boats." Lightoller responds, "Excepting the stewardesses, we turned several of those away." I had to verify this from the transcripts, but wow, I had never known this before, and to be quite frank, I don't like it, even by 1912 standards. And yes, they were crew members, but it just doesn't feel right to me. Personally, it's very upsetting. But again, we cannot confirm or ever know if Catherine was one of these women or if she stayed or tried to evacuate the ship. It's sadly a mystery that will never be solved. What we know with absolute certainty is that Catherine Jane Wallis died on April 15th, 1912. She was only 36 years old. Her body, if recovered, has never been identified. And now there were 4 orphan children: Melita, James, Frederick, and Cecilia. Catherine's estate, valued at £37, 15 shillings, went to Annie Maria Allen Norton, Mr. Albert Norton's wife, the family that Melita was staying with. All signs seem to be pointing to the Nortons being family friends, I'm guessing. Catherine and her husband James's passings were tragic and far too soon. Being only in their 30s, they had many years ahead of them, and they should have been able to raise their children into adulthood, at the very least. Thankfully, as you'll hear, their 4 children carried on their legacies for decades to come. 3 years later, thanks to the Titanic Relief Fund, at the age of 15, Melita Wallis was to be apprenticed to Mr. Proust, a hairdresser, at a premium of £20 over the next 3 years. In 1920, Melita married Frederick Charles Howar, a boot and shoemaker in Southampton. In 1921, they were living together on 350 Portswood Road, still in Southampton. Under her occupation, it says she took care of household duties, and on October 10, 1925, Melita, her husband Frederick, and their 2 children, Joan, age 2, and Robin, only 1 month old, took the Cunard Line's Asonia from England to Quebec, Canada. They went to stay with a friend, W.J. Smith, in Ontario. Melita had 2 more children, Gordon and Ted, and lived out her life with her family in Canada until her death on April 1, 1969, at 69 years old. Melita's eldest daughter, Joan, known as the matriarch of the Wallis family, later went on a 10-year mission to identify one of the Titanic's recovered bodies as her grandmother, Catherine Jane Wallis. She believed her grandmother was buried in the Halifax Cemetery. In a PBS documentary titled Titanic's Ghosts, Joan recalled how her mother, Melita, never got over the death of her own mother. At only 12 years old, understandably, it was an incredible loss. Joan said she took it upon herself to try and identify her grandmother as a gift to her mother. Joan turned to Alan Ruffman, a historian, for help. Looking at the coroner's reports from Nova Scotia, Joan was certain that body number 281 was Catherine. The description states, number 281, female, estimated age 30, hair brown, clothing, black coat, blue skirt, red jersey, green blouse, woolen singlet, gray underskirt, black boots, and stockings. Large wart on index finger of left hand. Effects, $26. No marks on clothing. Joan ended up giving a sample of her DNA to Ryan Parr, a bioanthropologist at the Paleo-DNA Lab of Lakehead University in Thunder Bay, Ontario. Unfortunately, Fairview Cemetery is built on a gently sloping side of a hill, and when scientists began exhuming the bodies, they discovered that water had seeped into the grave of body 281. The flooding had frustratingly expedited the Earth's power to decay, and as a result, eliminated any sign of human remains. In a strange coincidence, Joan died on April 15, 2006, and as far as I know, nothing else has come of this investigation, but good for Joan trying her best to do this for her mother and for her grandmother. Even though they didn't get the results that they had hoped for, at least the family tried, and that is what is most important. Melita's son Robin lived a beautiful long life to the ripe old age of 100. Good for him. He actually died this year on January 12, 2026. His obituary states, his life's most cherished adventures include the great love story of his beloved Mary, who waited faithfully to marry him when he returned from war. Robin served in World War II in the Royal Canadian Air Force on the Marine Squad, Pacific Defense, and came home safely to enjoy 60-plus years of marriage to Mary and a loving family and rich friendships. Robin captivated everyone with his remarkable memory and stories from the war times and his life full of adventure all over the globe. He always became fast friends with whoever he met, making old and new friends feel celebrated just by their presence. He sounded like such a lovely human being. He is survived by his son Kevin, his daughter Tracy, granddaughters Ashley and Brittany, and great-grandchildren Eli, Adalia, and Bennett. Joan and Robin's nephews, Tim and Jeff, made headlines during the 100th anniversary of the sinking when they took the MS Balmoral Titanic Memorial Cruise, a 12-day retracing of the Titanic's route. On April 15th, the anniversary of the sinking and the anniversary of Joan's death, the brothers beautifully dropped a necklace into the Atlantic Ocean over the wreck site. This necklace was made using a piece of Joan's jewelry, and it was melted down into a cross, and it had Joan's name on one side and Catherine's on the other. It's just such a beautiful way to pay tribute to their aunt and to their great-grandmother. Catherine and James's son, James Robert, was living at the Barracks HM training establishment, Shotley, Suffolk, England, in 1921 at 16 years old. From what I can gather, this looks like a training ship for young boys planning to enter the Royal Navy. James's service dates were from 1921 to 1928. He worked on such ships as the Ganges, the Defiance, and HMS Ramillies. He was documented as having blue eyes, brown hair with a florid complexion. I had to look that up, but it means a red or flesh complexion. He married a woman named Gladys Cook in 1961 and passed away on February 2nd, 1988 in Southampton at 83. I don't believe he had any children. Their son, Frederick Walter, known as Frank, had a difficult life even after all the loss he had suffered as a child. In 1921, at the age of 14, he was an inmate at Parish of Portsmouth Children's Home on 138 St. Mary's Road. I can't find any other information on him other than that he died way too soon on July 26, 1929, at the age of 22, supposedly of tuberculosis. His estate of £269 and 16 shillings went to brother James Robert and sister Melita. He lived at 77 Chantry Road in Southampton at the time of his death. And lastly, their daughter Cecilia, like her brother Frederick, lived in an orphanage. At the age of 12 in 1921, she was living at the All Saints Convent and Orphanage, Shenley, St. Albans, Hertfordshire. In 1926, at 17, she boarded the Alania, another Cunard ship, in Southampton and traveled to Quebec to be with her sister. On June 28, 1930, she married Harold Coulter Cones at St. George's Church in Homer, Ontario. It was said that her brother-in-law gave her away and that she wore a princess gown of ivory satin and lace. Her veil was bordered with chantilly lace and held to the head with clusters of orange blossoms. She wore ivory satin slippers, a string of pearls, and held a bouquet of sweetheart roses. It sounds like she looked absolutely gorgeous on her wedding day, and I'm sure her parents and her brother were all looking down at her with pride. In 1931, she and husband Harold lived in Lincoln, Ontario. Her occupation was a homemaker. I couldn't find much more about her other than this, but she did die on December 13th, 1986 at the age of 77, and I am unsure if she had had any children. What an incredible story. I have many, many questions, like what happened to Catherine the night the Titanic sank? Was her body actually recovered? How did her husband James drown? And why did two of her children end up in orphanages while the other two had better opportunities? Was it simply their age? And why did Melita live in another home when she was 11? No matter the answers, I think it's important to give Catherine Jane Wallis a voice. She was a hero. It saddens me that her name is not more well known and that the stewardesses who perished are not addressed often. They deserve to be honored for their contribution to the passengers and what they experienced on that dreadful night. It doesn't matter if she tried to evacuate the ship and was turned away or forgot paperwork. She took care of third-class passengers and probably guided many to safety. Who knows, she could have been overwhelmed and trapped in third class trying to help other mothers such as herself and children like her own to try to navigate their way to the lifeboats. And as a single mother of 4 children and a grieving widow, she tried to make a good life for her family. I'm a single mother, and I can't even imagine having no one to help you, and then you try and provide for your family after your husband and father die, and then you die? It's a horrible act of fate, and to think of what her kids went through, losing both of their parents in less than a year. It's remarkable that one of her sons joined the Navy and her 2 daughters took the transatlantic crossing despite what happened to their mother and their father, and I'm sure that took a lot of courage. Despite all of the loss in Catherine's story, there is still a lot of life and hope. The family line has grown over the generations. Whatever you may believe in, I hope Catherine and James can look upon their family and smile. Their names and their stories are still alive today. They have great, great, great grandchildren. That's amazing. May the Wallis line continue on, and may we always remember the incredible sacrifice that Catherine Jane Wallis made. Sacrifices that were made in leaving her children behind to work on these voyages, and for the sacrifices made that night that led to her death. We will never forget Catherine or any of the other unsung heroes of April 15th. Let's pause and have a moment of silence for Catherine Jane Wallis. Let us honor her and the hundreds of lives that were lost with her. Thank you, crew, for joining me in today's episode. As we disembark, I wish you happiness, love, and peace. Take care, and I'll see you next time on the Voices of Titanic.